Here we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just give it a couple of seconds for the last people who are just connecting on. Okay, great. My name's Jacqueline O'Money. I'm one of the Education and Training Officers at Under One Roof, and we're delighted to be here today with our colleagues from Falkirk Council to chat to you about all things damp and mould. We're going to be here for about an hour today. The format of our event today is to have an online presentation that I will be doing, and then we will have a Q&A at the end of the event. I'm joined today by my colleague Rebecca Grant, who's our comms officer. Rebecca's going to be in the background doing all the techie stuff and helping with the hosting of the event. Depending on what kind of device you're using today. You'll either see along the top of your screen or at the right hand side of your screen, you have got a whole load of options. The two things that we're concerned with today are the chat box and the Q&A. The chat box is where you can put in any commentary that you have as we go through the event. Rebecca will post links to pages on our website or other government pages or any other web pages of interest so that you can look at those links for further reading in your own time. The Q&A is the box that you'll use to post any questions. So as we go along through the presentation, if any questions come to mind, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end. The good news is that we are recording the session today, so don't worry too much about furiously taking down all of the notes and trying to pick up absolutely everything that I'm saying. You'll get a copy of the recording and the slide deck sent to you within the next 24 to 48 hours by Rebecca. So you'll have the chance to go over things in your own time, and then you can come back to us if you've got any specific questions. I think that kind of takes care of the housekeeping. We've got a few colleagues here from Falkirk Council who I know want to introduce themselves, so I'll hand over to them to do that. And yeah, I'll come back to you and we'll get started with the presentation. Neil, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Neil Wilson. I'm the Senior Private Sector and Interventions Officer with Falkirk Council.
Hi, I'm Craig Beat. I'm a Private Sector Officer with Falkirk Council and deal with enforcement for landlord registration and property condition.
Hello, I'm Gina Wilson. I'm the Private Sector Service Development Officer and I work closely with the Private Sector team.
Great, thank you so much. So these are the guys that are here for any council specific questions that you might have at the end, please use the Q&A box. We're here to help you as much as possible. So whatever it is that's going on, if you want to have a chat with us about it and ask a question, then please make use of the facilities today. Without further ado, I will just do the necessary screen sharing here. And we'll get started on the presentation. All right, so if you haven't heard of us before or you're vaguely familiar with what we do at Under One Roof, I'll just give you a refresher. We're Scotland's only charity that provides free impartial information on repairs, maintenance and retrofits for tenement flat owner-occupiers, landlords and housing professionals in Scotland. We're funded by the Scottish Government and about 28 out of the 32 local authorities across Scotland as well. Falkirk's one, and we're very grateful for that. My background before I came to Under One Roof was in the private sector. I was a letting agent for many years. So this particular subject of damp and mould is quite close to my own heart. I've dealt with a lot of properties with issues over the years. I know the difficulties that tenants have. I know the difficulties that landlords have, and you know how it's a challenge within the sector to try and eradicate this from our housing stock in Scotland. Scotland. We're going to talk today about some legislative proposals that the Scottish Government has on deck at present. But before we kind of get into that, I'm going to just run you through a few things about damp and mould. I've got some pictures because what's a PowerPoint presentation without pictures? And I apologise in advance if anybody is sitting with a cup of tea and a biscuit or a full lunch spread in front of you. I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible because it's not very appetizing. I think it's important as well to state as we get into what these legislative proposals are, just to confirm or reiterate that Under One Roof has absolutely no sway with the Scottish Government on this. It's something that the Cabinet Secretary for Housing has proposed. We can take feedback to the ministers and the civil servants, but we don't have any involvement in putting these proposals together as such. So when we think of our tenemental stock in Scotland, we are not just always talking about our traditional blonde and red sandstone tenement buildings. We are thinking about tenements per the legal definition in the 2004 Act. So any property that's been split into two or more horizontally for residential accommodation is classed as being a tenement. So flats above shops, 4 on a block properties, modern flat developments, low-rise, high-rise buildings, converted villas, whatever it may be. If there's flats in there, then chances are your building is a tenement. We know that our tenemental stock, like the majority of our housing stock across Scotland, is prone to issues with damp and mould. Particularly, we know that where properties are rented out, there can be additional issues through the use of the property that can exacerbate damp and mould issues. But essentially, when we talk about damp in properties, particularly in tenements, we're dealing with two main types, which is either rising damp or penetrating damp. A lot of people don't necessarily know the difference, and why would you? It's not your area of expertise. But essentially, rising damp is the upward movement of moisture from the ground into the lower section of a building's walls. So typically, you would have porous bricks and mortar that draw up groundwater. That groundwater contains salt, and in certain instances you can get salt contamination marks that are left on the walls once the water is evaporated, and you get a kind of crystallization that forms on the walls, in the lower half of the walls, and it's quite unsightly. It's, if you've ever seen it before, you know, you can be like, what is that? I've never seen anything like that before. I don't know what that is. Chances are that it's salt contamination from groundwater that's caused rising damp. It might be that your property has got a damp proof course in the ground floor or the basement, and that's become defective. It's maybe come to the end of its life, or there's something that's caused it to become something specific that's caused it to become defective. And that's allowing water in. It may be that your property at ground level or in the basement doesn't have a damp proof course at all, and that's what a preservation specialist company would recommend that the owners install to prevent rising damp. So something to consider. But what does it tend to look like? It tends to look like this. So you will see wet marks, wet patches on walls, on the lower section of the walls, internally or externally. And you can see from the image on the top right, that's what the salt contamination marks look like when it's crystallized after water evaporation. That's a kind of bubbling effect that you would see on walls. So if you have got issues with rising damp, or you suspect it may be rising damp, if it kind of looks something like this, or it's localized to the lower half of the walls, chances are that's what it is. Other type of damp that you can have is penetrating damp, and that's when water enters a property from the outside. So your most common causes of penetrating damp in a tenement building are where there's issues with the roof or the gutter. Perhaps you've got slipped slates or tiles, or you have got gutters that are blocked. It could be that there's leaf, like, you know, fallen leaves from nearby trees. It could be that you have got a little bit of foliage grown out there, or you've got a huge plant or what looks like a tree when you look up at the building that's blocking the gutter and preventing water from running along that down the rainwater good and is causing issues. It could be that you have got issues with the front facade of your building. You could have cracked masonry. If you've got, if it's a traditional building with your stone frontage and it could be that your pointing has come loose, you might be able to see that the building is really wet. You can clearly see that there's cracks in the stone, or you know, in the pointing joints that could be allowing water to penetrate through. It could be that you've got issues with the windows and the door surrounds, that when you have got wind and driving rain that's causing water to come in, or you've got blocked drain pipes or leaking drain pipes that are causing issues. And that's why it's really important that as owners you maintain the fabric of the building to try and prevent things like this from happening, that is going to, you know, lead to penetrating damp on the external of the building that is going to come through internally and start to create all sorts of problems. So what are kind of things that you would look for external penetrating damp, where you can see that you have got wet stonework? So your top left image is showing you that. It's also showing you a little bit of foliage growth at just underneath the gutters. Your top right image is showing you a plant that's, you know, growing where it shouldn't be growing, which tells you that there's something going on up there that isn't good, that's going to cause an issue with rainwater not being able to drain correctly. The bottom images you can see on the left hand side, where there's a downpipe that's rusted and cracked, and there's some wet stone behind it, and then you can see in the bottom right image where you've got the kind of green moss growth, some foliage grown out of the gutters, and just an indication that things are not right there. So next time you are leaving your building or you're around there to visit your tenant, whatever it is that you know, you're doing, if you're in the vicinity of the area, do me a favour and cross the road and have a look at the building. Look up and see what you can see. Is there anything that's, you know, obvious to the naked eye that suggests that there's a potential issue that the owners are going to need to look at? Where we have damp, we've got mould. Mould is a type of fungus that's all around us. It grows on surfaces in damp and humid conditions. It will spread like wildfire in certain cases. And our main causes of mould are where we have got water ingress from leaking roofs, plumbing leaks, gutters, downpipes, that kind of thing. Could be that we've got issues with poor ventilation inside a property. So we've got no way of moisture escaping from the property, and we've got an increase in humidity. And we've just got nowhere for that to go, and it is going to eventually manifest into black mould. It could be that we've got condensation. Obviously that occurs on cold surfaces where we've got hot, humid air, and that meets a cold surface, a cold window, or cold outside wall. Then that's going to condensate, and you're going to get all of the kind of the water droplets from that, where if you don't clean it off properly and it just sits there, it's eventually going to start to breed mould. And if we've got rising or penetrating damp that's causing an issue inside the properties, either in the common areas or in flats themselves, mould growth is typical there. So things that we would expect to see are bottom right image where we've got condensation on the window. If we're not wiping that off, or our tenants are not wiping that off on a regular basis, we can see on the top left image where that will eventually lead us to where we've got mould growth around the window itself, and then on the on the walls next to it and the sills. Our top right image, we can see black mould growth on a ceiling, and our bottom left image is where we've got some fungal growth. There's different types of mould. I'm not expert enough to go through every type of mold that exists, and let you know I guess the danger level of that. I know enough from my previous life as a letting agent that mold is obviously not great. It causes issues, not just with the property, but can affect people's health, particularly if they've got underlying health issues. I don't know if anybody is here today where they've experienced a property that's got this kind of fungal mushroom growth in it as a result of damp and mold growth. I have, and it's super unpleasant. These things will just they'll just grow, they'll fall off, and then they'll just grow back again, unless there's a treatment carried out. So where we've got anything like this in our properties, we want to try and eradicate that as quickly as possible. But before we kind of get into the legislative proposal, let's have a chat about why it is important for you to maintain and look after your buildings. So as landlords, you have bought a property or properties within a specific building, or perhaps you own a portfolio of properties. You need to know what your responsibilities are. You didn't just buy the four walls off your flat, you also bought a share of the common areas. Whether you are a resident in that building, whether you are renting that property out, doesn't negate from your responsibilities. We have got to move away from this kind of culture of disengagement that owners and landlords can find themselves in. You can be on the receiving end of it, or perhaps you're somebody that doesn't want to get involved. We need to stop that. We need to understand what our responsibilities are, and we need to be taking part. You own the building with the co-owners, and you are legally responsible for maintaining it. You need to be aware of the condition of the building where your property or properties are. It's not enough to say, well, I've got a tenant in there, they're fine, I'm collecting the money, that's it. I don't know what's going on. I'm on the ground floor, don't know what's happening on the top, doesn't affect me. It actually does. And vice versa, if you're on the top floor and there's an issue on the ground, you've got a responsibility per the title deeds. If you don't have a copy of the title deeds for the flats that are in your portfolio, then I would strongly suggest that you get onto Registers of Scotland, pay the fee, I think it's £3.60 or so, to download a copy of your title deeds and the title plan, so you can refresh yourself on what it is that you actually own, what you're responsible for individually, in common with the other owners in the building, and perhaps mutually with some of the owners in the building or neighbouring buildings, and what your share split of the costs are. We want to kind of move owners away from being in a cycle of reactive repairs and having high unexpected bills. We want owners to have adequate building insurance. It's a legal requirement to have a building insurance policy in Scotland. Your title deeds may set out if you have to have a common or block policy, so one policy for the building that all the owners pay a share of. They may stipulate that you have to have an individual policy, or they may be silent, meaning that you're free to choose, but you have to have a building insurance policy. There is actually a clause within the 2004 Tenement Act that owners can request co-owners to provide proof of insurance, so that there's a comfort level in knowing that all of the co-owners have got an adequate amount of insurance in place. So if that's something that you're concerned about, then I would urge you to get in touch with the other owners to ask them to provide proof of insurance. Perhaps you're here today and you think, somebody's asked me for that and I never gave it to them. I don't want them to know that. What business is it of theirs? Well, it is their business because you co-own the building together. Nobody wants to be in a situation where there's a fire, flood, or other catastrophic incident, and you find out that people are underinsured or there's no insurance, and you've got a financial black hole to fill to try and reinstate the building. And we want owners to have regular communication with each other. We're not expecting everybody to get together for wine night every Friday in somebody's flat. We're not expecting you to become best friends, but we are expecting you to meet with each other on a regular basis. It might be monthly if there's ongoing issues. It might be quarterly, twice a year, once a year. whatever it is, but you need to know who the owners are and you need to be in touch with each other so you can have a chat about what's going on so that you can plan for things, and there's a kind of communication vehicle in place so that when something does go wrong or there are issues like damp and mould, that you know, you're not going through the pain of trying to find out who everybody is. You can get in touch and you can start to take proactive action. So what are we here to talk about today? The main crux of the matter is that the Scottish Government is extending the principles of AWAB's law into the private rented sector and social housing sectors in Scotland. If you don't know what AWAB's law is, it's a law that was brought into place in England following the death of a toddler called Awab back in 2020. He lived in a social housing property with his family, I think in the Midlands. It had lots of issues with damp and mould. There was black mould and a significant coverage of that throughout the property, and it caused him to have some serious health issues that ultimately led to the loss of his life, which is absolutely awful and tragic that a toddler lost their life to something that it was treatable, preventable, like black mould and damp in a home. So we don't want that to happen to anybody else again. The system in England is obviously different to what we have in Scotland. We have got quite a comprehensive legislative and regulatory structure within Scotland in our private rented sector and social housing sector. So the proposal that the Scottish Government have put forward as part of the Housing Scotland Act 2025 is for the investigation and commencement of Repair Scotland Regulations 2026. That was proposed by the Cabinet Secretary back in January to the Scottish Parliament. It's been debated in February and last week, and the next stage is for this to go to a vote. And if it's accepted, then it will be passed into law with a commencement date of October this year. It's part of the wider effort to raise our standards in our housing sector throughout Scotland, and it will sit within repairing standard legislation. So they don't have that in England. So their how AWAB's law is in England is, I guess, a lot more comprehensive to, I guess, to the naked or to the layman's eyes. We've obviously got the repairing standard in Scotland that we work towards within the private sector to make sure that all our properties meet that basic standard of repair. But this legislation kind of doubles down on bringing the principles of AWAB's law into Scotland. So what are the aims and objectives of this proposed legislation? It's to ensure that tenants have a warm, safe and secure home free from disrepair. It will place a legal obligation on landlords to investigate and resolve complaints about damp and mould. The aim is to reduce instances of long-term exposure to damp and mould in our housing stock. And the first tier tribunal at the Housing and Property Chamber are going to be tasked with dealing with complaints and reports of non-compliance with this proposed legislation as they currently do for repairing standard breaches. So what are some of these proposals? These are the kind of highlights, if you like. At proposal stage at the moment, it's that landlords will have strict timeframes to comply with in the repairs process. So when a tenant or your letting agent contacts you to say the tenant has notified us that there's black mould in the property or that there's an issue with damp, the proposal is that landlords will have 10 working days to investigate that. So that means that you kind of have to start the clock, arrange a visit to the property, whether that's yourself or whether that's through your letting agent or a contractor, that somebody's going out to investigate and have a look at what's there. You'll then have 3 working days after that investigation is complete to write to the tenant with a summary of what you found and if you propose any work to be carried out. It might be that you use that that written summary to say that you found issues with condensation in the property that were directly relational to a lack of use of the ventilation system within the property. It might be that you identify that this needs a specialist contractor to come out and have a look because it's quite likely that there's an issue with the fabric of the building, or you need to trace what the source is, whether that's coming from another property or it's coming from the fabric. And then the proposal is that landlords will have 5 working days to arrange work using a competent professional. As with everything that we deal with in this wonderful part of the sector, there's compensation proposals where there's been failures, and at the moment it's sitting that landlords will have to pay compensation up to the value of £100 where a landlord has failed to carry out investigations within that 10 working day period, or where an appointed contractor has failed to carry out works within that 5 working day period. So these are what the proposals are stating. We don't have any knowledge, information, secret squirrel chat as to whether this is all definitely going ahead at these kind of these numbers, or if things could potentially change. But we have to work on the basis that these are the proposals that are likely to be passed and come into being, and these are what our legal obligations are going to be. There's a few key points to consider when you're dealing with damp and mold. Some of you on the call today will have a lot of experience with this. Others, this is your kind of first forage into it. And I think it's important that we don't just necessarily think, okay, well, it's only a small corner in a room that's affected. It's not a big deal. We have to, or the government is proposing that there's a more holistic approach that's taken to this, and that landlords, letting agents, social housing providers, take a few key points into consideration when there are issues with damp and mould. So that you're trying to qualify what type of damp is it. Have you got penetrating damp? Is it clear that there's an issue with the fabric of the building? Is it rising damp? Or is it simply that this has occurred due to condensation? It's important to qualify that so you can determine the severity of the issue within the property and what the required remediation work is. I guess if it's a basic condensation issue, it's okay, how do I communicate with my tenant and provide them with instructions on how to ventilate the property correctly, or is it okay, this is very serious, we are going to need a specialist company in to give us carry out a survey and give us their recommendations as to how we resolve this. What kind of mould are we dealing with? Is it just surface mould? Is it, like a silicone seal around a shower and some tile grouting that's gone mouldy? Or is it something that's more deeply embedded, that's spread? Is it kind of this fungal mushroom growth? Some moulds are more hazardous than others. We need to think about the occupants in the property. Have we got vulnerable individuals that are living there? So have we got families there that have, with children? Have we got elderly people? Do we know if our tenants have got respiratory issues? Have kids got issues with asthma? Are there elderly people or adults, young adults, other adults who have got known respiratory issues where damp and mould would significantly impact their health even in small amounts. We need to think about where damp and mould actually is. Is it in a bedroom? Is it in a living area, in a high traffic area? That would be something that would be more concerning versus a small patch of black mould in a cupboard off the hall that's not used on a regular basis. Doesn't mean that you don't have to address the issue in that cupboard. You absolutely do. But you might not need to, I guess, fully spring into action as such as what you would do if it was in a bedroom or a living area where people are breathing that in, you know, all of the time that they're in there. That's more urgent. And you need to know where you need an expert. Do you need to, is it something that's kind of beyond your control? Do you need a qualified building surveyor or a damp and preservation specialist company to come out? It's advisable even in kind of borderline cases where you're not sure what's going on. Professional judgment in these situations is invaluable. They have got experience and have had sight of lots of different issues and can normally tell when, you know, there needs to be a lot of action taken and whereas, okay, this is just a case of cleaning something off with a hot water and bleach solution or a mold and mildew remover spray. If you don't know about this stuff, then always look to get an expert opinion on it. But what are some of the things that you can do now as a landlord to prepare for this? It's a really good idea that you arrange a property visit. Whether you self-manage your properties or you've got a letting agent, get out there and have a look at your flat or your flats. Make sure that you comply with the repairing and the tolerable standards. If you're not familiar with what the repairing standard is, then Rebecca will post a link to the legislation on that so you can have a look at it in your own time. But it's important that your property or properties in your portfolio meet this minimum standard of repair to comply with the repairing and the tolerable standards. So have a look at that. You might be thinking, I know that it's really difficult for me to get access to my property, Jacqueline. My tenant's a nightmare. Well, remember, per the Private Residential Tenancy Agreement, the PRT, that you have got authorised purposes for access, which are to carry out property visits or inspections, to carry out works, and to carry out valuations in accordance with the repairing standard. So if your tenant is difficult, they refuse access and it's for an authorised purpose, your option would be to make an application to the first tier tribunal on the basis that they're withholding access for an authorised purpose. We want to get you into the mindset now to take action when you receive complaints about damp and mould. Have you got something sitting in your inbox just now? Has somebody WhatsApp or text you or send you an email about it? Are you currently dealing with an issue? Make sure you've got a visit arranged there. Double check the communication method on the PRT so that you're writing out to the tenant or emailing them per their communication method to arrange that visit. Take photographs of what you find when you go out there. You need to get into the habit now of making sure that you've got written records for everything that you're dealing with damp and mould. So get a file started, have a copy of the email, go in there, screenshot a text or something, and put that in that file so that you can clearly evidence when you were first contacted about the issue, what it was that you found when you went round for the visit. What here are photographs of what I found. Actually, I looked at it. I was clearly able to identify that there was an issue with a trickle vent on a window not being opened, or an issue with the heating system, or an extractor fan not being on. I was able to carry out some cleaning or move some furniture around. Perhaps there was a piece of furniture against an outdoor an outside wall that wasn't allowing airflow in a room. Perhaps you've moved something. Take photographs of what you found, of what you done, and what it was like when you left, so that you can evidence that you've been proactive. If you're working with a letting agent, have a look at your terms of business agreement with them and have a chat with your property manager about what their policies and procedures are for dealing with damp and mould and how they're updating that in line with this proposed legislation. And make sure that you're speaking to specialist contractors to get professional advice if it's something that's kind of beyond your capabilities and your knowledge base, and you suspect that it's a lot more serious, or you have vulnerable tenants in your property and you need to take immediate action. Make sure that your heating systems are being regularly serviced and that the radiators are being bled. Make sure that tenants have got keys and instructions on how to bleed radiators if you're not going around to do that yourself. It's important to bleed radiators so that when the heating is on, that the radiator is heated to its full capacity. We all know when the narrative around tenants' lifestyle issues about keeping the heating on and the property well ventilated. If there's issues with the heating system, if the radiators are blocked up with air and gunk, the heating system isn't going to be working effectively. So have a look at that and see if you need to give them any information or radiator keys so that they can bleed them. Make sure that the tenants have got copies of the safety check certificates and service paperwork. If your letting agent arranges that, make sure you've got copies of everything and that the tenants also got copies too. If you're thinking about changing or upgrading your heating system, or you kind of want some advice on heating and insulating your property, have a chat with Home Energy Scotland. They've got surveyors that can come out to properties and have a look and give you recommendations. They've got access to lots of funding and grants for landlords as well. So if you're considering that, then speak to Home Energy Scotland. When you go round for a visit, make sure that you're checking all the ventilation systems in your property. Do the windows open properly? So if you have got a traditional tenement property with sash and case windows, check that all the windows open. If you open it and it falls back down, chances are you've got an issue with a weight in the window. If the ropes are frayed or they're broken, snapped, you want to get somebody out to have a look at that and to repair it for you. Make sure if you've, again, in a traditional property with sash and case windows, in the kitchen, if there's a worktop and sink in front of the window, make sure that the tenant's got a pole so that they can hook that on and open the window to ventilate the room. Make sure that with modern windows that the handles are intact, anything that's loose, that's missing is replaced. And if there's trickle vents on those windows, that they are openable. If sometimes they can get stuck shut, so make sure that you can free them and check that they're not full of dust and debris. Give them a clean out, a brush out, and that's a really great way for the property to stay ventilated. Not all tenants know about window vents. Some do and refuse to open them. But where you've got vents there, make sure that they work and that the tenant knows to keep them open. Any extractor fans that you've got in kitchens and bathrooms, make sure that they work and they're properly connected. You might switch it on or it could be wired into a light switch and you put it on and you think, yikes, that's making a weird noise. And you go and there's probably about 5 years worth of dust that's built up around the fan. Give it a clean, hoover it. Whatever it may be, make sure that the tenants know to do that on a regular basis. You might think, well, we've got these in our kitchen and our bathroom, but the tenant doesn't use them. If it's a separate switch, consider an electrician, appointing an electrician to wire it into the light switch, because chances are somebody's going to want to switch a light on when they go into a kitchen or a bathroom, particularly if they're internal. So if the fan goes on with that, then there's a higher chance that it's going to be able to extract out hot and humid air and help with your ventilation. I fully accept that tenants can reach up and switch off the isolator switch, but people do have success in rewiring them into light switches, so it's something to consider if that's something that you're facing. Remember as well to make sure that you're checking that the extraction systems that you've got in kitchens and bathrooms are properly connected and ducted. So what do I mean by that? I mean that particularly in a bathroom, the fan just doesn't go on and all that hot humid air just pumps out in the ceiling void, that it's actually connected to a ducting pipe, and that is vented externally, either on the external wall or up onto the roof. And if you've got a kitchen, an internal kitchen especially, where you've got a cooker hood that's just got a carbon filter in that, that's not going to extract out the hot humid air. So make sure that you've got some kind of mechanical extraction or that the window is openable. Make sure you know your buildings, that you know the condition of the building where your property or properties are in. Check the repair history. If you've got a property factor, have a chat with them about what's going on. Speak to some of the other owners. It might be that you can identify that you have got an issue with some kind of rising or penetrating damp. You can clearly see that there's a defect externally. You are struggling to get support with that. You might want to have a chat with colleagues at Environmental Health or in the private sector team at your local council. So that's something to consider. It might be as well that you want to double check per the title deeds about the garden ownership. If it's a usable space and it's got a washing line, or you can put a washing line up and the grass isn't at waist height or it's full of somebody's junk, then that is a usable space. We're in the spring and summer months for tenants to be able to dry washing outside, and you're giving them an alternative option as opposed to just always drying wet clothes inside, which can obviously contribute with condensation and mould. What are our top tips for flat owners and landlords? Well, as we've seen today, these proposals are going to create a challenge for us. It's going to kind of move us away from maybe just treating a localized issue within our property, and that we're going to have to consider what's happening in the building as a whole and start to treat the root cause. We often see where people have got issues with damp, and it's maybe causing things like dry rot, that owners or landlords can be really quick to get somebody in to deal with them. It's to start a treatment program for dry rot to eradicate that, but they haven't actually identified what the root cause is, and that's what we want to get owners in the mindset to be doing. So what is the root cause? When you know that, that's when you're going to need to speak to the other owners. So it's a really good idea that you have a list of all of the other owners' names and contact details, phone numbers, email addresses, and circulate that amongst all of the owners so they know how to get in touch with each other. We often find that people don't have that information. They've lost track of who owns what flats in the building. We all know that ownership is fluid in tenement buildings. Rebecca will post links to our pages on how to contact other owners and where to get assistance for that. But it is important to know who the other owners are and to have contact details for them. The Scottish Government, in addition to this proposal, is also considering some tenant reform proposals, and the Scottish Law Commission put one forward for compulsory owners associations in Scotland, so that we can join up with our counterparts in Europe, Australia, America, and other locations across the world where there are compulsory or mandatory owners associations for buildings. So the Scottish Government are considering that, and it is very likely, the indications are it's going to be very likely that owners associations will be made compulsory in Scotland. So Rebecca will post a link to our resources on owners associations, so that you can have a think about that as to whether it's a good time for you to consider forming one in your building just now, and some top tips on how to get started with that. We've spoken a bit about buildings insurance and why that's important to have. So at the same time as you're contacting owners or finding out who owners are to get their contact details, you can ask them for their insurance information as well. We always say it's important that owners know an up-to-date and reinstatement value for their property, so that if the worst happens, that they've got an adequate sum of insurance in place. Most insurers will refer to a price index, but sometimes if owners have owned properties for 5 or more years in a building, they might want to get a building surveyor out to do a reinstatement valuation survey. Likewise, if they've owned properties for 5 or more years, whether they've got a property factor or they're self-factoring and they've just kind of lost the thread with where things are at within the building, or they suspect that there's issues, but they're not quite sure. It's a good idea to consider appointing an architect or a building surveyor to carry out a building survey and get that building condition report with the kind of traffic light summary as to what you need to concentrate on urgently, what you need to do, you know, within a kind of, I guess, a realistic time frame, maybe, you know, 6 to 12 months, and what you can plan for in the future. When you're going round to check your property to make sure it complies with the repairing standard, or you're investigating issues where you've had complaints of damp and mould, have a look at the common areas whilst you're there. Don't just go in with the head down into the flat and that's it. As I say, go over the road and have a look at the building externally. Go out the back and have a look at the building and see what it's like. Can you spot anything obvious there that could be causing an issue? As you go up and down the property, you're not just looking at things like, you know, loose stair treads, or, you know, a wobbly banister, or, you know, is the stair lighting working? Have a look for any signs of damp and mould in the common areas. Make sure that the downpipes look like they're intact, that they're not cracked, that they're not rusted, and they're not obviously leaking. Make sure that you've got a schedule in place to have the gutters cleaned out every year, or perhaps twice a year if you're in a particularly leafy area, and that you're getting your roof checked on an annual basis. We want to avoid situations of penetrating damp, so where we've got the opportunity to maintain the fabric of the building, and by doing basic things like roof checks and gutter cleaning, let's get that in place. Let's start to think about a planned maintenance schedule. It doesn't have to be a big fancy Excel spreadsheet. It's just as simple as noting down that every week somebody comes to clean the stairs. Every month during the warmer months, the grass is, you know, is cut. This is when a window cleaner comes. This is when the guy's booked to come out to clean the gutters, that kind of thing, just so that people have got a rough idea of what's happening and what the costs are likely to be. It's a good idea to have a maintenance account for the building and kind of move away from this. Everybody just puts their cash in a brown envelope through somebody's door, or whoever it is that's drew the short straw to organise a repair. We just have to pay the money into their personal bank account. Let's try and move away from that and consider opening a maintenance account with a bank, so that we can pay for ongoing repairs and maintenance, and we can save for future repairs, particularly if you've had a building survey carried out and you know that there are issues. If you've got a property factor for your building, make sure that you're in regular contact with them, that they're carrying out site visits, that they're hosting regular meetings, and that they're acting within the parameters of their written statement of services agreement and the wider Code of Conduct and Property Factors Act. We hear lots of good, bad and ugly stories about property factors under one roof, and we want to make sure that where you do have a factor, that there's a good working relationship there. If your building's self-factored and you don't have a property factor, then have a look at our resources on self-factoring that Rebecca will post a link to in the chat. Seek professional help where you can from architects and building surveyors, and, you know, consider speaking to the council for assistance, using things like the Novaville Shared Repairs app, and just that awareness. Okay, we're in a self-factored building. Somebody or all of us at some point are going to have to take responsibility for this building and engage with each other, and get repairs undertaken, so that we avoid issues like damp, like mould, that can cause really serious health issues, and can affect the integrity of buildings going forward. So how can we help you with all of this at Under One Roof? We have got lots of informative articles on our website. If you're not familiar with it, go on and have a look. Our founders, John Gilbert and Annie Flint, wrote the original tenement handbook back in the mid-90s, and that was, as things updated, we became, everything went onto a website. We became a charity in 2020, and we have got lots of resources to help you with. We've got lots of photographs of chimneys, of roofs, of gutters, different types of roof coverings, drain pipes, whatever it is, you name it on a building, we'll have an article about it. There'll be some kind of photograph, some kind of pencil drawing, and a chat through about all of the different types of gutters that you could have, for example, the most optimum replacements, what can go wrong, and who's responsible for paying for it. Is it an individual repair, a common repair, or a mutual repair? It might be that you think, Jacqueline, I've got a really specific issue. I don't have the time to wade through the website. We've got our Ask an Expert inquiry service. We answer around 150 inquiries a month from owners, landlords, and professionals throughout Scotland. So go onto the website, click on Ask an Expert, fill in the information, and myself or my colleague Stephen will get back to you within a couple of days with an answer. So that is the end of the presentation. As I say, this slide deck will be sent out to you by Rebecca, so you'll have my email address to get in touch with me offline from this event if you want to discuss something and once you've had a look at everything. But we'll now go back into the main area. I'll stop sharing my screen and Rebecca will take us through the Q&A.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Jacqueline.
No problem.
So got a couple of questions
Great.
in the chat box at the moment.
Okay.
We've got a question from Carolyn who asks, what impact will the dissolution of Parliament in April have on the proposed legislation?
Really good question, Carolyn. We were actually chatting about that off camera before we started today. We actually don't know. The Parliament had another session to discuss this proposed secondary legislation last week, and the next stage is for it to go to a vote. Neil highlighted that there's another bill that the Parliament are voting on, so we don't know if they are going to vote on this imminently, or if it's going to have to wait until after the elections. We don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you than that, but I don't. As and when we get any more information, we will update you as soon as possible on it.
Absolutely, thank you. We've got another question from Joy. I'm not sure if this repair is necessarily damp and mold related, but
Okay.
we'll go ahead. She says, I have a flat and a stair with 2 other flats. The cafe on the ground floor refuses to communicate or pay for repairs. 3/4 of us are in agreement. Sadly, there was no missing share scheme in Stirling. Unlike other parts of Scotland, we are at an impasse. What should Joy do?
Okay. That is a difficult situation, but if 3 out of 4 of you are in agreement to going ahead with work, and you've achieved that majority through following proper procedures, then that majority is legally binding, and you can, on all owners, and you could go ahead with the work. If the cafe owner, the commercial owner, doesn't want to engage, and they're refusing to pay their share, then it might be that the owners need to consider what type of legal action they could potentially take. If you can't get anybody to engage with you and you've kind of exhausted all options, then you would need to look at what the legal action is that you can take. It may be that the owners decide, okay, we want to split the cost of this between us, and use one of the claims actions at the Sheriff Court, depending on the value of it, to recoup the money back. It might be dependent on the issue of the repair, that you want to go to the Sheriff Court to make an application for a sheriff to compel the owner to comply. Yeah, you might need to give me a bit more information on the specifics of that offline, Joy, and send me an email about it. But essentially, if your decision was reached through proper procedures, it's legally binding, and you could potentially go ahead with that and take legal action.
Great, thank you so much. We've got a question from Gaynor from Falkirk Council, who asks, this is about the timeframes within Alps law. If the proposals are approved, will the 5 working days timeframe to arrange works mean that work needs to have started within that time? Or is it just that landlords will need to prove that, got someone in place to do it at some point in the future.
My understanding of that would be that there's 5 working days to appoint a contractor and have a start date in place for the work. But we will need to wait and see what clarification we get from the government to know exactly what they are expecting to happen within that 5 working days. I think in certain cases it's going to be completely unrealistic for work to have started and be completed within that 5 days. But at least if there's it can be demonstrated that a contractor has been appointed and that there's a start date, then hopefully that would be enough. But we have to wait and see what the government decides when they firm this up.
That's great, thank you. And Gaynor says thank you too. I can't see any further questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Okay.
I had put one in there, just kind of get the ball rolling if you want to answer that. So if a landlord has visited their property and found that their tenants aren't ventilating it, they're drying clothes indoors, they aren't doing anything to combat mould, and it keeps coming back after cleaning, what can the landlord do?
Okay, in that situation, which a lot of landlords do find themselves in, and it is very frustrating when they feel that the tenant is being negligent in their use of the property. It's about the landlord providing clear instructions to the tenants on how to use the ventilation systems that are in place. It's about having a chat with them face to face if possible, showing them how to use everything, and it's about arranging a follow-up visit. Once they've been given instructions, they've been shown how to use everything, being told what they can do to clean any surface mold that's present, or the landlord may have chosen to do that, and then to go back for a follow-up visit and be able to kind of have a look at what if there's any action, if there's any improvement, or if it's still the same, or has it got worse, that the landlord's got photographic evidence of all of that. They have a look at their tenancy agreement to see what's contained in there about how the tenant is using the property, give the tenant a warning, arrange another visit, and if it's still no improvement, then the landlord would need to decide whether they want to continue on with that tenancy or not. If the landlord's doing absolutely everything that they can, they've got all the systems in place, they've given them the instructions, they have literally physically shown them how to use everything, they've followed up with visits, they've given them warnings, and the situation still remains and there's no improvement, and it's causing issues in the property and perhaps to the common property or to another flat within the building. If it's particularly bad, then the landlord would need to have a think about, do I want to continue on with this tenancy or not? And if not, then serve the notice to leave, end the tenancy, restore the property, and then move on with another tenant.
That's great, thank you, Jacqueline. I just thought I'd pop that in because it's one
Yeah.
that has come up in quite a lot of these webinars that we've done.
You're right, it absolutely has. It's really topical. And I think a lot of landlords have kind of balked at the fact when I'm saying, well, when you go round to visit, if you see black mold, get the hot soapy water and bleach out, or the mold and mildew remover spray, and have a go at tackling it. And people have been absolutely outraged, and quite rightly so, going, I'm not cleaning off somebody's mold, Jacqueline, forget it. But realistically, and as it sits within English law, with AWAB's law, there is that onus upon landlords, and it is quite possible that we could get that in Scotland. We might not. They might, it might be classed as a competent person, which the tenant could be classed as being a competent person. But we need to get into the habit now, if we can, or start this and build up the habit of where we find issues and at surface level as a result of kind of lifestyle lifestyle, and it's not something a bit more sinister that needs, you know, further investigation work, because it's not just within the flat, it's within the building itself, the fabric of the building. If we can do something to eradicate it, then let's do that. Like I said in the presentation, it might be that you realise that the tenants moved all the furniture around in a bedroom, their bed's against the outside wall or the wardrobe's against the outside wall, and the reason it wasn't there originally is because it prevents airflow, and condensation is going to build up and you're going to get black mould on the walls. So sometimes the case of moving the furniture back. There are kind of low level actions that landlords will be able to take in certain circumstances to assist with this. Not in every case, but where they can, then be proactive and do it to preserve your property and prevent it from getting worse.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So it's now just 1 minute to 1. I can't see any further questions in the chat or Q&A. So I
Okay.
think we will wrap it up there.
Lovely. All right. Well, look, everybody, as I say, we are, oh, Gaynor, you got your hand
Gaynor,
up?
hand up. Come on in. Oh, you're still on mute, Gaynor.
Hi, thank you for that.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank Jacqueline, Rebecca and Under One Roof for delivering today's webinar for us. We hope that you found it informative and useful. We would like to highlight that our private sector homepage, our housing homepage, I've just popped it into the chat. This page contains a range of information relevant to homeowners, to landlords and to letting agents and private tenants. It includes a page with information about Under One Roof Scotland too, and we hope you find this information helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks, Gaynor. All right, everybody. I will we'll leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope my photographs haven't put you off your lunch too much. Keep in touch with us. Once you've got all the information from Rebecca, let us know if there's anything else that we can do to help you. And as soon as we get any updates that come through from the government, we'll be sure to let you know as soon as possible. But thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Lovely, thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, Gaynor. See you all at another Under One Roof event soon. Thank you.
Thanks.